Okay. This show is created to you by the media team of the Accounting Association at Cal State Northridge. Welcome to our third AA podcast for the spring 2022 semester, the only accounting podcast campus-wide that makes any sense. My name is Peter, and we are so happy for having Jad Ballout for joining us for this podcast. Today we were talking about what it means to have a career when earning and obtaining your CPA and the many opportunities that can follow that are available. Thank you again for coming out, Jad. And can you tell us a little about yourself, where you graduated from, which firm you previously worked for, and where you are currently?
Sure thing. Thanks, Peter, for having me. I graduated from the University of Southern California. Again, graduated with a Bachelor's of Accounting. Eventually obtained a tax internship with Deloitte. I did have, the DNLC or the Deloitte National Leadership Conference before that, as well as the Emerging Leaders Program with EY. Eventually, I chose Deloitte, obtained a full-time position within their business tax services group. After that, I did that for a year, obtained my CPA, and then eventually transitioned into finance, where now I am a financial analyst at Houlihan Lokey within their valuations group.
Congratulations. That's pretty cool to hear. I'm just curious to ask, so you've only had experience with two of the big four firms, so EY and Deloitte, correct?
Yes.
Okay, cool. And I know you touched on this before when we spoke. Before USC, you were at a community college, right? And then you transferred?
Yes, yeah. So I grew up in the San Fernando Valley, well, like most of us here. I went to Granada. I eventually, from Granada, went to Moore Park Community College out in Ventura County. And then from Moore Park, I just transferred into USC as a junior.
Sweet. Okay. Let's see then. So let's start off with, why did you choose Deloitte other than any other big four? You mentioned you had EY experience and also Deloitte. And why did you choose Deloitte, not EY or another mid-tier? Many people say there's no difference, but what's your take?
Well, when I was at USC, I kind of, the big brand names are what people are excited about. So I mainly applied to the big four. I got interviews with all of them, but I only was extended an offer by Deloitte and Ernst & Young. It all boils down, I would say, to the culture. I mean, as cheesy as it sounds, everybody's going to say the same to you, but it really essentially is the culture, because across these big four professional services firms, they pretty much do the same work. There's no difference in what's going on. So ultimately, it's who you enjoy working with. Could you see yourself, sitting across or sitting on a table for hours and hours and hours with that person that you're going to be working with, and kind of, striking up a conversation about something non-work related. So essentially, I mean, Deloitte was basically a how to work hard, play hard type of culture. Ernst & Young, I felt, was a little bit more friendlier. They were they were kind of more caring, I would say, definitely. But they're both, everybody has a different culture, and it just depends on what the person likes, when they're recruiting with these firms.
Interesting. Okay. So, I mean, with all that being said, what would you say are some of the biggest takeaways you had from Deloitte? Like, if you had to nail it to 3 points, what are the 3 biggest takeaways you've gotten from Deloitte?
3 different takeaways. I definitely think that Deloitte teaches you to be a great, to develop, honestly, your time management skills, because the sheer amount of things that are being thrown at you, it really teaches you how to be organized. I definitely think that it also teaches you how to work hard, because with the sheer amount of work that's being thrown at you, you definitely have to find ways to be more efficient in order to, knock out that deliverable and deliver it to the client. And honestly, third thing, I would say patience. There are going to be times where these big four firms test your patience in terms of, the workload and kind of the environment and what's going on. And it really teaches you to kind of hone in on the big picture, and in order to be patient in terms of getting that promotion, or after busy season you're dropping hours. So I definitely, those are three takeaways that kind of, I would say, developed further when I was working at Deloitte.
Gotcha. Going back to the workload, just curious to ask, what was the amount of hours you're putting in on during a busy season versus off busy season?
So I know you guys are all fresh and don't really have that work experience, but I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It was plenty of hours during busy season. I was doing a minimum of 70 hours. So it's definitely, you're going to be eating at your computer and, doing most things at your computer. Who knows? You might be sleeping. But yeah, so it's mainly 70 hours busy season, and then non-busy season, it could drop to 20, 30, 40 hours. It just ultimately depends on that week.
Okay. And I know that
I do have,
oh yeah.
sorry, Peter, sorry to cut you off, but I do have colleagues who actually work more than me. And I also did have colleagues that worked less than me. You know what I mean? So it depends on the people and who's funneling work over to that individual.
Okay. And also, so on that point, I know for you specifically, since you're from the San Fernando Valley and you worked at the LA office, the commute was around an hour, right? An hour, give or take?
Yeah, I would say ultimately depends on when you leave, but if you're trying to get there by 9 a.m., it was probably about an hour and 15 in the morning. And that at night, if you're leaving in the midst of rush hour, it would probably be about, it could get as bad as, an hour and a half.
Wow.
Hour 45 max. That's if really bad road conditions.
Okay. So during busy season, have you ever seen yourself just, I don't know, staying the night at the office, or have you seen people ever do that just because the commute home is just not worth it, so they stay the night and stuff? I've heard of that, but I don't know if that's even true.
I actually can attest to that. I've heard of some people who did do that before, especially during busy season. I was lucky enough to start at Deloitte in the midst of COVID, so I was not required to go into office, and being able to work virtually kind of made it easier to work through busy season. But definitely it depends. Like if you're on a client that provides a big chunk of revenue per year, like maybe like $1 million retainer fee or something, then you could definitely see yourself working a ton, because that client usually is more time consuming, and that's why hence the large sum of money. So you might be working extra hard if you're put on a specific client like that.
Okay. So going forward from that, after your time that you've spent at Deloitte, what made you want to transition into a more finance-oriented job? You mentioned you're working at Houlihan, which is one of the greatest firms when it comes to mergers and acquisitions. And what made you make that sort of pivot?
Ultimately, as you gain experience, you kind of develop a sense of what you like to do and what you don't like to do. And I kind of fell out of love with what I was doing. In the beginning, I did enjoy it. However, I came to see myself not really waking up with a sense of excitement anymore. So I started looking out, kind of looking at the accounting and finance related roles, and I really enjoyed valuations in specific and what it entailed. So I did my research. I taught myself a few things, and ultimately it got me a job at Houlihan. I ultimately applied to a few firms, and Houlihan was my top choice, and that's how that happened.
What other firms did you apply to?
There are a few other valuation firms, specifically, including Duff and Phelps, and then there are some other roles at some other banks like D.A. Davidson, and I've gotten some, like I tried applying to some investment banking positions, but ultimately I found out that that's not what I was looking for. Um, but yeah, even the Big Four has some valuations groups.
Hmm. Okay. Um, I mean, on that note of your new position, how are the hours looking compared to when you were at Deloitte?
I would definitely say it's a steady workload all year round. More so around 50 hours a week. So in comparison to the workload at Deloitte, it was, well, especially during busy season, it was a lot less. But during non-busy season, you could see yourself working more here or at Houlihan.
So it sounds like it's more consistent compared to kind of like the wavy seasons of working in accounting.
Exactly. Yeah, it's definitely like more consistent, and it's like you know what to expect in terms of the workload.
Okay. Um, Going back to like right when you were applying and looking at different firms, what when you were researching which firm to go to, what were some of the characteristics or things you were looking at while you were applying for different firms? Like what were some things that were kind of a must or just fit your criteria?
Sure. Do you mean in terms of choosing if like the finance position or the accounting position?
Your finance positions, like when you were getting ready to leave Deloitte.
Okay. Um, it was honestly a mixture of a couple of things. It was, of course, I do look at the brand. If it's a company that can, give me some recognition elsewhere. I also did look at, I also made sure to, speak to people who work there, make sure that it's actually a good learning experience where you come out a more well-rounded professional. I also was looking at things in the LA area because in specific I wanted to stick around in LA, and what was great was Houlihan was based, their headquarters is in Century City. So that made it extremely convenient for me.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, and also compensation. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, compensation was a big factor as well in terms of the workload at Deloitte. I There were times where I felt underpaid, so I did look out for that as well.
No, especially in LA, that's compensation is probably a really big factor considering the commute and just everything else. I mean, it's California. There's no way to beat around the bush. Um, hmm.
Exactly.
So this might be one of the more important questions that people who are in accounting are interested to hear about. Like the question I'm going to ask is, how did working at Deloitte impact your ability to transition into finance? Because I know a lot of people say, and a lot of people, we hear that, accounting is the lifeblood of a business, and a lot of finance is based off of principles of accounting. So from your experience, how was the transition from going into Deloitte into Houlihan Lokey?
Ultimately, I do think that accounting is very, very important. It goes hand in hand with finance. I mean, you see yourself in finance forecasting, based on historical financial statements and even building your own financial statements. So having that knowledge of accounting um, definitely helps. But to answer your question about, Deloitte, I do feel like Deloitte impacted it by putting a brand name on my resume. However, I do think that if you're not going to stick around in accounting for the rest of your career, it's not recommended that you stay too long to the point where you're siloed into accounting, or in specific, like let's say you choose tax or audit. You're siloed into that because once you hit, let's say, senior level, I do know people who, hit that senior level and left the firm and ended up being in the same position that I'm in, just because it's two totally different experiences, and you're going to get two different things out of it. I thankfully kind of had some people who were in my corner telling me, you shouldn't stick around too long if it's not a long-term career goal. So that's how I made that transition. I had that guidance. But ultimately, having that brand name will open doors for you. It definitely will. But if you're looking to make a switch elsewhere, definitely do it early on. And if you're looking for more hands-on experience where you're going to be digging into things a lot deeper than you would, Big Four is also, if you're going to stick in accounting, Big Four is not the route for you, I think, because you get a lot more experience at a mid-tier firm if you're working, whether it be in tax or audit. So it ultimately just boils down to, you got to think about what your preferences are, what you like, what you want, or even what you want out of what kind of experience you want to get out of this. And that's what it boils down to, essentially.
Sweet. That's pretty invaluable. That's good to hear, especially because from everything you're saying, sounds like people on the inside who worked alongside you have told you. So thank you for sharing that. Now for those wondering,
Sorry, I was just going to say, and of course, I mean, you are going to get conflicting opinions. Also, if you are going to get people who say, don't leave until you hit manager. Now, that might be true if you want to stick within the accounting profession. You shouldn't leave before you hit manager, because, once you go into industry, your salary cap is going to be limited after manager if you leave before manager. But if you're looking to pivot into another profession or another industry like finance, the earlier the better.
Okay. I guess that kind of explains the 2 to 3 year turnover rate that most Big Four firms experience.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And just for those wondering, just as myself, what do you think? So what's some advice you would give, or something that you would have done more throughout your college career that would have increased your odds to land a spot in one of the Big Four accounting firms? Like, what's some advice you would tell your younger self in college?
Don't be lazy. That's one thing. You don't let the fun in college blind you from, the long-term goal. Of course, I mean, when you're young, take advantage, have fun, take advantage of the zero responsibilities, but also make some time to, get some valuable experiences under your belt, especially like what you're doing, Peter, getting internships at such an early point in your college career, whether it be in wealth management, whether it be in accounting, tax, audit, you're doing a rotation, or whether it be a finance related role. Get as many experiences as you can, because you want to make sure that you're going into the industry that you want to go into, and you're going to enjoy what you're going to be doing. And now's the time to do so. It's, the world is your playground.
Okay. Thank you for that little shout out, Jad. Much appreciated. And honestly, other than that, I just wanted to thank you once again for joining us. I hope this information can get our listeners thinking about what they can do to next advance their academic and professional success. So, Jad, once again, thank you for your time and thank you for having us.
Of course, Peter. Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
All right. And please feel free to contact us with any questions at media@aacsun.org, or you can leave a comment down below. Don't forget to follow our YouTube channel, Facebook, and Instagram to hear more about our future events. Thank you and enjoy today's podcast. And thank you so much for listening today.